to Run with Purpose. This is episode number 128. And for those of you that are new to the show, my name is Flores, and I'm so very glad that you found this podcast. Would love if you would subscribe. And as always, you can reach out to me on all of the socials everywhere at Flores.run. We have another special guest this week. I'm very excited for this conversation. Courtney and I met a few weeks ago when I reached out on Instagram after seeing a reel she had posted and kind of just connected with it. And then as I've been following her, just really loving her presence on social media, this positive attitude, a lot of things running, which obviously led me initially to her page. But there's just so much motivation, and I'm excited to learn more about her story. So Courtney, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Before we kind of jump into anything here, let people know how they can connect with you.
Yeah. So my Instagram is CC Road Runs. So that's the best place to connect. And then I also have a blog that's same handle, ccroadruns.com. So you can check that out. There's some race recaps and whatnot that are on there, But lots more to come.
Awesome. Yeah. And we'll put all those links in the show notes so you can check it out. You don't have to write this down while you're listening, wherever you may be listening at. But yeah, I don't want to kind of hesitate and really just get into understanding a little more about your story and kind of what has gotten you to this point that you're at today with your Instagram and kind of your motivational kind of speaking that you have with the platform.
Yeah. So I like to always say when people kind of ask, like, what was your story that brought you to running? I'm definitely not somebody who's always been a runner. But I have been active majority of my life. So I grew up, my first love was soccer, and started from early elementary school, went through middle school, high school, and then played just recreationally in college. So yeah, soccer was like my life. It's what a lot of my friends came from that I'm still close with now, those lifelong friendships. And it was just what I poured everything into. With soccer, I feel like a lot of people, just put running with it, but right. I was not a fan of the long distance running whatsoever. While I was definitely not the most technically, advanced player on the team, the thing that I was good at was my speed. And so for practices, especially, I was always a big fan of like our sprint workouts. And so that's speed work. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that's where I felt like I excelled and kind of where I found my place in the sport. But long story short, I got to high school, and as I said, it was kind of like what I really put my identity in. Came to my junior year and was expecting to make the varsity soccer team. I had been on JV for 2 years, and then kind of had the rug ripped out from under me, and I was cut from the team along with a couple other friends that we expected to kind of like advance to that next stage in our like soccer career. And so it happened to be the same summer that my parents got divorced. So it was like a big kind of like identity crisis. Yeah. So kept playing soccer though, like club sport wise. I tried to pick up lacrosse because I was like, I want to do something. Like athletics has always been like a big part of my life. But again, running never was one of those things that popped into my head of how I would spend my free time.
Right.
Yeah, so I was always in pretty good shape, loved being active. And then I graduated and went to Purdue, where, as I mentioned, I did some like intramural soccer, and really I just kind of like fell off the train of like moving. Like I where my identity and my friendships and everything were based in soccer. Once that was gone, my identity kind of started going more towards being like the party girl and like going to parties, spending time. And that's how I made my friends, and which obviously included drinking. And I just found myself never going to the gym, never getting out and like getting that movement. And it just became drinking and eating and just having like a really sedentary lifestyle. So outside of school, that's what it was. After I graduated from Purdue, I'm going to back up. So 2016, running's always kind of been in the realm of things between soccer or, but again, never wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. 2016, I remember being in my college apartment and I was watching the women's Olympic trial marathon. Um, and I was supposed to watch it, quote unquote, um, because my distant cousin is Amy Cragg or Amy Hastings
Yeah.
previously before she got married. So very distant, but like we come from one of those families that it's like, she's your cousin.
Right. Yeah. This is your cousin. Make sure you're watching.
Yeah. So at family reunions and everything, she wouldn't be there like she was as a kid. And then the older she got, I was like, where's Amy? And they're like, she's running. And I was like, why? Like, I didn't understand the magnitude of her talent and like her place in the sport. And now looking back, I'm like, I am an idiot.
Yeah. You're like, okay, that makes a little more sense now.
Yeah. So I remember watching her and she obviously won the race. And I
Right.
was like, she not only ran 26.2 miles, which was like unfathomable for me at the time, but like she won and got a place on the Olympic team. So that was kind of like, I like to think back that maybe that was like a seed that was planted. And then, so anyways, got to Chicago after I graduated from Purdue, was pursuing my career. And for about 2 years, I just continued the same lifestyle. When I was spending time with friends, it was out at a bar, it was out at people's places, drinking, that kind of thing. And I remember just looking at myself in the mirror one day and I was like 25 pounds heavier than I had been when I graduated college. And I was just like, I didn't recognize myself, not only physically, but kind of emotionally as well. I considered myself like happy and everything. I didn't necessarily think that I was in a dark place, but looking back, I think I was. I just didn't really have a purpose or feel that I had a purpose. And so, anyways, leading up to 2019, it was November of 2019. I remember getting a text from my best friend, and so it had been a month after the Chicago Marathon had gone through the city. And she, I read my phone, and she was like, "Hey, would you have any interest in signing up for the Chicago Marathon with me next year?" And this is also a friend that I grew up playing soccer with. And I was like, sure, why not? So at the time, I knew that it was 26.2 miles. I had never run more than a 10K. And I just don't think that it might've been good that I was like oblivious to what I was actually entering myself into. But yeah, then we signed up for 2020. Obviously COVID hit and the world shut down. So that race was canceled. But then I ended up running in 2021 and it just, I caught the bug. It completely changed my life. So I'm here to stay in the running world.
I love the aspect of your story. And I was obviously here writing a ton of notes about it, but this idea of this identity crisis, right? Of how we put our identity in a specific thing. And when that thing gets taken away from us, how we can kind of lose ourselves in it. I'm curious of when you had that mindset shift of kind of the first identity crisis, right? Of, hey, I'm an athlete, I'm doing this. And you kind of turned to this more of a party lifestyle. Did you see that kind of transition happening, or was it one of those where in hindsight we're actually now paying attention to it?
I think looking back at the time, I didn't think anything was happening. I think I just always identified myself as somebody who loved sports, loved that athletic lifestyle. But once I got to college and I was just in this whirlwind of a whole new life, moving away from my family. And then, typical of what a college experience is, being put in a brand new place. I think a couple years went by. And then when I tried to go to the gym for the first time in months and I realized how much harder it was to do things, I was like, yeah, so apparently you do have to like keep at your fitness in order to maintain it. I feel like that was like the first time I realized like, oh, okay, yeah, this feels different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can then kind of with that, the idea of not moving, I think I had a similar experience in college where played baseball growing up, and then I go to college and I'm like, I'll be fine. I don't need to hit the gym all the time. I don't need to do this. And it's like, oh no, you did. Cause you remember how you were doing it for school every single day. Like this, you have to do this to keep up with it. When you had that realization, right, of, hey, I didn't recognize myself in that. Was it something that, and I've talked to other people about this, was it something that you personally noticed with you, or you started to kind of get those additional hints from other people kind of being like, hey, things are changed, or maybe you're seeing something go down a different path than you had expected?
Yeah, I think my last year of college, I remember I had a couple comments from like my mom. She was like, she's being a mom and she's worried. And she's like, I just feel like you're like hungover a lot. And like whenever I call, or you're sleeping until like noon. And I was just like, Mom, that's just the way it is. I'm in college. It's fine.
That's why I don't have an 8 a.m. class, Mom.
Yeah, that's why I didn't sign up for those. I planned my schedule accordingly.
Exactly.
No, but I think that was definitely one. But my friend at the time, now husband, he has always been somebody who's been really active, loves the gym, big, like really into like weightlifting and that kind of thing, played rugby and football growing up. So he had that active lifestyle too, but he's just had that consistency throughout his life of just like working out, whatever that may look like, is just a part of who I am. And he was the first person that I think made me realize that activity and fitness in your life can really like bring someone true joy. And so towards the end of college, because he went to Purdue too, I remember he asked me a couple of times like if I wanted to go to the gym with him. And at the time I was like insulted because I was like, you think I need to go to the gym?
Yeah, that seems like not the line you want to use.
Right. But well, he had more intentions. At the time we were just friends. So I was just like, okay, rude. But I did accept a couple times and I went with him, and I didn't like it because I wasn't good at it and I felt out of shape and everything. I felt awkward in my own body kind of thing. But I think as we talk and look back at that time now, he was like, I wasn't trying to get you in the gym to go to the gym. He said, I just like felt like I know what my relationship with like exercise and movement and fitness is and how much joy it brings me. And I just wanted that for you too. So while I didn't fall in love with weightlifting, it helped lead me to that place where, I did find love for movement in my own way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think between my mom and him, they definitely were ones that were kind of like either having worry or seeing more potential in me than I was seeing, I think.
Yeah. I think that last point right there is exactly where I was going to go, is this idea of the movement being the potential, right? Of being, hey, actually getting out and doing something gives you that kind of motivation to continue to do more, right? A lot of times when we see people that have unhealthy lifestyles, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of oversleeping, overeating, over drinking, these things that are very sedentary, like you said. But when we're moving around, there's certain things you can't eat and drink when you're doing a lot of moving around because you're going to feel like crap if you do that. So if you already have that in your mentality of, no, this is something that I'm going to do. I'm going to move. I want to move because I know the joy it brings me. I love that idea of movement bringing joy, right? With how cold it's been, I've been seeing your posts of you running outside. Kudos to you. I think I've ran 4 miles this year and they were in Florida over Christmas. Over New Year's. But it's so cold. It's hard to say, hey, I need to get out and do something, get out of the house and go to the gym or do whatever. You see the elliptical in the background. Like my wife uses that thing 5-6 days a week and she loves it. And she's going like stir crazy because she really just wants to go walk on the trail, but she can't because it's got awful cold. And this idea of moving to bring joy and having this, and then having people around you to kind of point out those things of saying, hey, I don't know if something's going on, but how can we help kind of motivate you and push you to do something a little more?
Yeah. And I don't know. I think to the point of what made me realize that it was bringing me joy, especially when somebody's starting out with their journey into fitness, of whatever that may look like, it's hard because you're not good at it. Like it's uncomfortable. It's hard. Yeah. It's just, it's foreign to you. And so I think it's human nature to want to like retreat from that. Like we don't want to do something that makes us uncomfortable. And I kind of joke sometimes when people are like, why do you continue running? I'm like, because it was so hard to get to the place where I'm at now. And I never want to go back,
I don't want to have to do this thing over again. There's a guy at work that he is like a sub 3 hour marathon guy, and he's ridiculously fast and compared to me. And we were talking about it. He's like, yeah, I basically took off for like 2 years. And he goes, and I've been trying to get back into it. And he goes, and it's not easy. And I've been taking a break to try to heal and stuff. And he goes, be careful with how long that break is, because if you want to get back into running, I'm like, well, I'm still doing fitness stuff. Like I'm hitting the bike, I'm hitting the gym, I'm doing movement. But yeah, I remember what that running journey started out as. And mine was really, it was too expensive to play golf. So I needed something to do outside. And I was like, what about this running thing? I've heard people do this, and I guess I'll pay for it. It's cheaper than golf, I told my wife. And that changed real quickly when we started doing the States and stuff.
Yeah, no. Right.
Yeah. Between travel and shoes alone, it's been a very expensive journey. But I agree with you. This idea.
Yeah, you got to work that into the budget.
Exactly. People aren't wanting to embrace discomfort in anything really in life, right? And when we're starting out, that's when we feel the most discomfort, because it's just taking us out of our element, out of the normal thing that we're used to doing, or really what our body wants to do. Like, would I love to just sit on the couch and watch movies all day? Hypothetically, that sounds like a good idea, but we'll watch one show or two shows and we're instantly like, we got to get up and do so. Like I walk around the kitchen, or I do it in the middle of the day, just walk around my kitchen while I'm on phone calls working, because like I can't just sit still. And I think when we put that movement into our lives, that's when we can start see it kind of trickle down into different areas, where we then start telling more people about this thing and trying to be like, hey, let me tell you about this really cool thing that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that kind of ties back to the reel that initially kind of connected us. It was a highlight of a couple clips of just like that drinking lifestyle. And I said that those were my coping mechanisms for a lot of different things, whether it was like stress, whether it was like sadness in my life. And I always, looking back, it's like, yeah, you can have a super fun night, but the next day isn't going to be great. I remember seeing this quote. It was like, going out tonight is the thief of joy for tomorrow. And I was like, yeah, I kind of connect with that, where it's like I think just kind of that lifestyle of like partying and stuff is trying to maybe chase that excitement and that happiness and that comfort, but it's never going to lead to the same kind of fulfillment that you get after like a run, like a long run in the freezing cold or the blazing hot temperatures, whatever. It's horrible and you don't want to do it. But what the feeling that you get after that is just like, it's one of my favorite feelings. So that's why I feel like, even though it's hard and it sucks sometimes, like that's maybe as runners why we keep chasing it.
Right. It's your point. It's we're all chasing something that we're probably not going to specifically do with running, right? We're chasing this high. We have this high feeling, and then we're like, oh, that crap, I got to do that again multiple times because we have issues. But like you said, it's the same thing. If we party or do whatever to reach this goal that we're not going to do, because we're trying to fulfill now with a possible future, but we don't know the steps we want to take to get there. And sometimes those steps cost us a little bit. They cost us time, they cost us sleep and energy. And, I can't go out tonight because I have to do this run in the morning, or I have to do this other thing, regardless if it's fitness or not. How we can lean into these coping mechanisms to deal with these stressors that we have in our lives, and always chasing that one thing, right? It's always just out of reach. And because of that, we strive, or we try to find shortcuts in a way to strive for that. But we know when we find those shortcuts, a lot of times it actually puts us further back, because we were trying to just substitute for something else.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes back to that whole idea of just balance. I feel like whatever that is in life, you have to have balance. And I feel like sometimes in running, it can introduce a great idea of balance in your life. But sometimes we go overboard too. And then people are like, okay, are you maybe going in too much? Like,
are you okay? Is everything all right?
Yeah. Are you okay? So we can go that way too. But I feel like that's part of the reason why I just love the sport so much too. It's provided me with that sense of balance and just being able to kind of like keep things in perspective. I know we keep on talking about like my past with drinking and everything. I do still drink. Like I love a good cocktail, a glass of wine, whatever, but it's, I love going out with friends, but it's allowed me to have like the place that I'm in now. I just have so much more balance, which is
Yeah.
just, I'm really thankful for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's the balance, and it's also the reason for it, right? This idea of like, hey, if I go out and have a drink with someone, or I have a drink with my husband or wife at home, like that's fine, because it's the reason behind it. It's not a coping mechanism that's saying, hey, I want to forget this situation
Yeah.
that's going on. I don't want to deal with this. Along those lines, obviously, when you make those changes, so we go from identity crisis of athlete into party girl, and then you have this like realization, right? And we go from party girl to going, hey, I need to figure things out and kind of get myself back on the track I want. I need to make a change, if we want to say it that way. How did you handle the people that were in your life in that party time and kind of the change there? Because I had to imagine there's probably some tension there of, hey, Courtney was our fun party girl, and now she's lame and wants to go to the gym. Like, how did that conversation or situation play out?
Um, well, there definitely were the relationships that were based, solely on just like the social activity. And so it was the friends that I only saw out at the bars, or I only saw at the parties or whatever. And of course that's what our foundation was built on. And so when I was kind of drifting away from that kind of lifestyle, I guess, those friendships kind of fell away too. But I think it's one of those things where it's like, that's fine. That's just, friendships come and go, I think, in your life, relationships do. And those were ones that I had a great time with at a certain time in my life, but it was okay to move on from, because I don't think that it was going to be benefiting me moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the friendships too that I either, really amazing relationships, like my best friends, my sister, my husband, those kind of people who were seeing this change really close to the front lines of it. And I think they were seeing kind of the transformation in front of their eyes, and that they love me. And so obviously that was something that they supported.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so it was kind of like two different kind of directions. But I'm so lucky to have, people that are really supportive and really have been, I mean, I get comments sometimes from people like, well, this is a good example. So I ran my first marathon and I signed up for my second. And the first one must have inspired such a change that my husband, who hates running, decided to sign up for the marathon too.
Nice.
So we ran it together. Yeah. And then my sister now has like an aspiration to run a marathon too. And she's just like, I saw what it did for you and I want that for myself too. So there's those kind of relationships that are like, instead of them being like, oh, you're not as fun anymore, they're like, wow, I see how much happiness this brings you. I want that for myself too.
Right.
So
it's your idea that you mentioned of having that foundation, right? Of understanding our foundation with those other friends, where it was based in this stuff. It was very shallow, very surface of, we did these things and that was it. But those really close to you could see that transformation, right? You have the foundation with them of there's built on trust and love and understanding. And when you were in that transformational period of changing and growing in that, people see that. And yeah, it definitely resonates with people of going, what changed in you? Like something changed. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I'm like, well, I do a lot of running. I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that, but what else can I do to get me into that same, right. that same mindset? But yeah, I've had a few people that through the journey and people that I've met and ran with that have said that I've been somewhat of an inspiration, which is a weird thing to like even think about or say. But yes. Hey, I started running because of this, or I started doing this thing, or I started doing that because of something you said on the podcast or some conversation that we had. I've made a ton of friends just originally being guests on the podcast and then just continue to talk and like, hey, that's a really good idea. Or, hey, I implemented that, or I did this. And then I steal their ideas and make new episodes with them as well. And I think when we have those relationships that are kind of built on how can we continue to improve each other, right? Like when I have guests on the show or even people that I communicate with on social media, I want to be able to add something to their life. Like, I don't want to just be like, hey, I want to take and ask you questions. Is, hey, what can I provide to you as well? And we can kind of learn together in that process, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's why I just love the running community so much. It's sometimes I almost am like, this seems like too good to be true. Can people really be this like supportive and like just cheerleaders for each other? But I think it's because all of us have different stories of how we came to where we are in our running journeys. And I don't know, I don't think anyone had it easy, getting
Yeah.
to where they are. And so it's just the biggest group of people that might be strangers, but we're just cheering each other on. And I feel like that's the really cool thing about the whole like running social media world too, is that there's so many of these people that I've never met, but you form these relationships and you just kind of have that understanding of one another.
Yeah.
It's just awesome.
Kind of along the lines with that,
Yeah.
you've been, your Instagram account is relatively new, right? For like more running related wise. Cause I think
Oh yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you had
I
said
have,
like your husband called you like a running influencer or something like that. And you made a comment about that.
yeah. Yeah. I started it just a little bit over a month ago. And so that's what's been kind of crazy is that I don't know. I feel like I just kind of have all these thoughts. I just like put them onto a reel or whatever. Because when I first started running and kind of the algorithm started getting me into running accounts, feeling as though I had people to connect with and like be inspired by, or just feel comforted by, maybe I'm not hitting my pace every single day and that's okay. Or, I don't have the biggest goals. I'm just trying to get by day to day and I'm trying to get my training in. Like having those kind of like authentic and real people speaking to you is something that I kind of wanted to be able to provide to and just like speak to. So yeah, I'm definitely, that was, yeah, a thing that my husband said, like you mentioned, he was like, oh, so are you trying to become an influencer now? And I'm like, absolutely not.
Like, yes, I want free shoes and free gear, obviously.
Yes. Give me all the free
check the link
stuff.
in the bio. Here's my promo code. No, all the
Right.
cringy things, but it is true of like
Yes.
how we meet people that have similar interests with us and we can have these common, the episode a few weeks ago, there's like common ground, right? Of we can come together and say, hey, we're going through this together. Now, how can we support each other? Because like you said, we all have our own story, how we got here, what we're going through, what we will possibly go through. And being able to have that community just to lean on, be like, hey, Courtney, I remember you said you ran Chicago. Like, tell me a little bit about that. Like, what do I need to think? Like, even something that small allows us to interact with people in a different way. And then, with families and lives, as we kind of grow and change, having those people that have had shared experiences of how did you handle this? Or here's my background. And this is where I've struggled with this in the past. And now because of that, I'm here, maybe my situation can help you or your situation can help me. And as for all the bad things that I think social media can bring with it, the running community is a stronger knit that I've noticed. Now, again, the algorithm just throws it at me because that's most of the things that I talk about and show. But it is really inspiring to be like, hey, I know I can, if I go to a race and someone I know is in that city, they're more than likely going to be there to cheer me on. They've never met me in person. They've never seen me, but they're going to, say, oh, way to go, Jonathan. And then I'll never see them again. And we'll talk on Instagram and then that'll be it.
Right. Yeah, I connected with this runner who's in Sweden, and I really want to do the Stockholm Marathon. I was going to do it this year, but some plans have changed, so I won't be able to. But she's run the Stockholm Marathon before, and she's going to be running it. And so I was just like, what tips do you have? Like, what did you learn from the first time you did? And then she was like, I'm trying to break sub 4. Like, what did you do to break sub 4? And so it's just like this person that's literally across the world, she and I are connecting. And that's just like, I don't know. It's really cool. So like you said, social media can be such a dark place and a negative place. And you just like, you open up a video that you see and you like, and you see all those negative comments, and you just don't see that on these running platforms, which I love. I hope it stays that way because it's amazing.
Well, we'll see, but it is very motivating. I say we see because that's just social media in general. The trolls will come out when the trolls come out, and I can't say much as a male in his mid 30s. Like I don't get the harassment that you ladies would be getting, obviously, when you post things or about anything really on social media. But yeah, for the most part, there is a tight enough community that you can, again, be authentic with them and really show up as yourself and know that you're going to receive feedback when you need it, or if you ask a question, someone's going to give you authentic answers, and it's not just going to be surface levels. Really, people really are trying to get to know people. And I think that's when you get runners that aren't, we'll just call us everyday runners, right? We're doing our thing. We're putting our grind in. We're not overly influencers. We're not making money off of these kinds of things. When we can have those conversations, it allows those barriers to kind of be broken down, right? And we think about kind of making changes, kind of like wrapping back up. Apparently someone is calling my wife and it's coming through my headphones. That's hilarious.
Not right now. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. She's not available at the moment. I didn't even think about turning that off on the computer. Did you hear that ring? Did a ring come through?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Well, it's going to be on the recording. Anyone that's listening, it was in my headphones. So we'll see how that plays out.
We're having another runner join the podcast.
Yeah. We're just inviting more people. We're just going to make it a group effort thing. But when you think about this idea of kind of making changes, I'm curious as you've gone through this process, as you've kind of seen yourself evolve and transform in ways, and we're obviously always continuously doing that. What would you tell people that are in similar situations to where you were, or the thought process that you had, how they can help make that change, right? You said you noticed those things and you made a change, but you probably had some doubt, some steps, some extra motivation that was needed to get there. So I'm just curious on your, like, how to, when it really comes to making those changes, or like seeing where I am and where I want to be, kind of the thought process there.
I think it's kind of a two-part thing. One, I mean, we touched on it, is just relationships and surrounding yourself with people that will support you and understand that, you know, you might lose some relationships that aren't going to be benefiting you if those people aren't the ones that are kind of supporting your goals to move in a direction that you aren't on right now. Whether that's your family, your friends, you're always welcome to hit me up on social media. I would love to chat. You know, just surrounding yourself with that kind of positivity and that kind of authentic, I don't know, just support that it's going to be a long road potentially, but I've been there and I'm here for you and I'm going to love you through it. And then I also think we live in a world where instant gratification is what we want for everything. And making a lifestyle change is hard. And I think just going into it, rather than, especially with it being like the new year, I think New Year's resolutions are such a big thing for so many people. And whatever the study is, it's like by day 9, like
they're all
January
gone.
9th, typically people they've already fallen off. And so I think just realizing that if there is a change that you want to make, realize that it's going to take a while, and just be consistent and continue to show up. And I think one thing that helps me a lot is I tend to be I'm not a perfectionist, but I kind of ride the line. And I think when I'm not hitting my goal every single day, sometimes I feel as though I'm failing. And so if you're trying to make a change, realize that you have to just keep on showing up every day. And it might not look perfect. It might be, I'm supposed to get out for a 45-minute run today, but I don't have time for that. I'm going to go for a 20-minute walk. That's okay. Like, just going with the flow of things and just staying consistent. I think that's just really what it comes down to. When I ran my first marathon, and I was definitely a couch to marathoner kind of story. I remember getting that 20-week, or maybe it was 18-week training plan. And I could run maybe like a good 2-3 miles at that point. And I was like, how in the heck am I going to run 26.2 miles at the end of this? Because my first long run was like 5 miles, and this math is not mathing. And so I ran 5 miles and I was like, that was incredibly hard. How am I going to do this? And I think the way that kept me consistent was, to be honest, it was like out of fear of not being able to hit my goal. And so I set a big goal, and I don't know if I would recommend this for everyone, but then I told everyone that I was going to be running marathons. So I was like, okay, I've told everyone, so now I have to do this. And so while I did, have to miss some workouts and whatnot throughout that training plan, I stuck to it so hard because I was like, if I don't, there is no way I'm going to make it to the start line, let alone the finish line.
Yeah.
So that was my experience.
I think it's interesting because as you were saying that, it made me realize that I think runners, just because we're amazing, awesome people, with this idea of running races and that sort of thing, we have this built-in consistency because we understand that in order to get to a race, there is work that needs to happen. And we obviously all have these setbacks of like, hey, maybe I'm failing, we're trying to show up every day, like you said. But I think that consistency is kind of ingrained in us in knowing that, hey, I have to make these small steps. The 18-week training plans, right? You go from 10 miles a week to 60 miles in your peak week. And even then you're not even running your full distance still. You're only running a 20 miler or maybe even a 22 in some plans. So you're like, I still haven't done this. Like, so what's going on and how do I love that. Yeah. I ran 5 miles. How am I going to run a marathon? Remember when I ran my first half, I ran the half and I was just like, there is no way in hell that I'd be able to do this twice. And then a year later or 6 months later, I did it. And you're just like, yeah, because we can put our minds to it and understand that consistency. And I think that ends up showing up in other areas of our lives when we build in that consistency. And I think that can be true for a lot of things. If we can show up consistently in one area of our life, like, hey, this area is really important. I'm going to keep showing up every day. I'm going to be consistent. Those habits transfer into everything else that we're doing. Right? We can continue using the lessons that we learned to apply those to different aspects outside of our fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to get
it's great. I think that's one applicable for me, even in like my relationships or my work, like my career. I think it's like, instead of looking for that instant gratification and being able to be like, this is my best friend and we do everything together and it's just perfect and whatever. Or my career, all of a sudden I got promoted to the position that I wanted in 2 months. It's like, that's realistically not going to happen. And so you just have to be present and continue to show up and just understand that things are going to take time. Yeah. And that, I think, is what makes them so much sweeter, is that when you do have to it's a slow burn. Sometimes the slow burn is what leads to like the best, outcome. So running for sure has kind of been that for me. And I've been able to see it in other aspects of life for sure. It
definitely carries over. And the other thing that you said, also I wrote down slow burn because that may be a good name for this episode. We might be the slow burns. I like that idea.
Yeah.
And then people are listening to it like, that's why it's called that. Or maybe it is, maybe it's not.
Like, I was wondering where this is going to come full circle.
Yeah, who knows? You're like, I see the slow burn in the title. It doesn't make any sense, but here you go towards the end. But the other thing that you did that I 100% agree with, and I tell people to do this all the time, is telling other people your goals and the changes you want to make. Yeah. Because there's one thing to like disappoint ourselves, right? When we have these yearly goals or anything that we want to do, goals that we set, we can disappoint ourselves. That sucks. It is what it is. But when we start telling not just one person, but two people, like multitudes of people or the internet, putting it on display for everyone to see, it really puts a little more fire behind us. Like you said, possibly a little fear of like, hey, I don't want to fail in front of all these people. People think things bad about me. It's probably not the most positive thinking outlook of it, but it helps with that motivation to say, no, I need to show up because all of these people are expecting me to do this. We had, we were planning the last few races of the year. I had done New Mexico. I was planning to do New Mexico and I had all the rest of the races completed. I think New Mexico was 47. And I actually that week came down with like a horrible cold. I had like a fever. I don't ever remember having a fever as an adult, the whole thing, not COVID, but literally like the worst kind of cold I could have. And I was like, this isn't good. I'm like nauseated, feel like I'm going to vomit as my wife is driving me. We were flying out of Minnesota. We had already moved here to Chicago. Yeah. And I was just like, this is awful. Like, I was like, do we cancel? And I'm like, but if I cancel, my buddies that are supposed to be meeting me at state 50 in a couple months, like that's not 50 anymore. and that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you're like, so yeah, you're like, no, everyone knows that this weekend I'm running to Mexico. We're going to figure this out. And even during the race, I like lost my hearing from the flight because of air pressure.
Oh my gosh.
So like I couldn't hear. And then it was also a mountain run, which I didn't think about. It was like my most elevation change ever in a run. Like these are things that you probably should look at the website before you sign up for a race, but fits in the calendar.
That's okay.
Yeah. But at every step of that journey, everything was hurting. And all I could think about was like, hey, I need to do this. People are counting on me in a way. Like I told people I was going to do this and I need to kind of see it through and push through it. Is it going to suck? Yes. But at the end, I'm going to feel fantastic. Everything's going to be amazing. And I'm going to be on cloud 9 because I pushed myself to earn it maybe a little more. And I think with anything in life is when we set these really tough goals, if we let people know, hey, I'm doing this really tough thing, we're not doing it for an attaboy, attagirl. It's really to say, I need this extra motivation because I know when I finish this, when I go through that slow burn, the changes that I make are really going to just be greater than I could have imagined from the start.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's, I think too, being authentic like that and really just putting yourself out there and putting your goals out there, not only like provides you with a sense of like, okay, I got to do it, and have that motivator, but also it again pulls in those relationships that then can support you through it, even through the hard times. You can talk through it rather than, you just showing up for the race and people didn't realize you were going to be racing it. But then I think too, it's like we're human and sometimes we won't, like you might not have made it to that race. And I think being able to then show up and be like, you know what, I didn't hit my goal and I didn't make it to the start line or whatever. I think that also like allows people to relate with that situation even more. And it allows people to feel as though they have a place in the sport because we all sometimes fail and that's okay. I recently, about coming up on a year ago, I started working with my coach and she, just ran grandma's marathon to try to make her Olympic qualifying time, the Olympic trial qualifying time. And she had done it the year before too, but she missed the time. Yeah. She's like a big proponent for it. She's like, you have to run it. And I was like, maybe one day. But she ran it last year and 2 years ago and missed her qualifying time by 1 second. And then so she's like, all right, I'm going to go back and I'm going to run it again. And then she missed it again by less than a minute. And the way, obviously I respect her and look up to her so much as a coach, but also when she was really authentic in the way that she showed up on social media and gave that race recap. And she's like, I not only didn't hit my goal once, but I didn't hit it twice. And that doesn't make me any less of a runner. And that inspired me because I'm like, you know what, this fear of failing, I think maybe is a good thing, but also it's okay if you fail, like that's real. And so being able to see people that are in places of, they're a mentor to someone else and being able to just be like, yep, it's okay to fall sometimes is really a great thing, I think.
Yeah. I love that.
You don't see that enough.
Because you have this idea of the fear of failure can help us be a motivator. But to your point, knowing that failure isn't the end, right? We can always learn something in the failure. The only true failure is when we say, I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm quitting from this because of the circumstances that were around us or whatever happened. When we say, hey, I'm just straight out and we give up on ourselves, that's when we really fail. But what can we learn in these moments and say, okay, maybe I can adjust things here or adjust things there. Sure. But you also have that humility aspect of, hey, I'm going to help other people grow. To your point, having a mentor that's, hey, she's a great coach, but at the same time, you're like, I can learn and how to deal with these situations because inevitably in my running career, I will fail at something. Things will not go the way I want them to.
Right.
This is how I want to be able to react when those situations happen.
Yeah. And I don't think, I'm just thinking of like other sports and back to the whole upbringing of being in soccer and everything. It's like you either win or you lose. And I feel like that because it's also a team sport, there's the community built around you, but I just remember always being like, you either win or you lose. And there's no other thing like that, or you make the team or you don't. And the reason why I've loved running so much is because within the sport, there is that fluidity. And so there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days, but that doesn't mean the bad days aren't going to still produce progress.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
So.
All right. I'm sure we could talk
Yeah.
for hours and hours. And one of these days we'll run in person and maybe do an episode in person since you're not too far away. But Courtney, thanks for being on the show today.
Enough. Yeah. It's been so fun. Thanks for having me.
It's been a blast. I will have all of Courtney's information in our show notes. So make sure you can connect with her. If you're feeling some failure and curious about change, any of that stuff, reach out. I'm sure she'll be excited to chat with you.
Of course.
Perfect. And to everyone else, you can reach out to me everywhere on social media at flores.run. Subscribe, leave a review for the podcast. Let me know you enjoy it. That's how people want to come on the show and talk to me. And it's so fantastic and I love it. But thank you so much for joining me today. Remember to keep running with purpose, one step at a time. See you guys next week.